Hey guys, Wyatt Claypool here, and there is a tragedy I need to correct on this show today. I have been working with OneBC leader Dallas Brodie for several months now, and I have neglected to actually have her on the show. Now, this isn't really my fault. We both have very busy schedules, and somehow we've never been able to cross over long enough to actually do something together. But now we are correcting the mistakes of the past, and I now have Dallas Brodie on the show with me here today. Thank you for coming on, Dallas.
Thank you for having me, Wyatt.
Yeah, this is a long time. Yeah, this has been a long time coming, but every single time we were like thinking about doing a show, we were both in Victoria. I didn't really want to do it from like two different hotel rooms. It would feel awkward, and I wasn't at my studio. And then when I was at home, there was like 50,000 things going on, but we are here now.
Yes.
And that's all that matters.
That's all that matters.
Well, let's, I guess, for everybody who kind of knows what's been going on, but not in great detail, let's start from the beginning on your political journey that has led us up to the point where I have finally brought you on the show after dragging my feet for many, many months. So how did you get into politics in British Columbia?
Well, the very beginning was the summer of 2020 when I got together with a group of women who also live in Vancouver to start making some noise about the mess that was developing on the streets of Vancouver. And we started a group called Save Our City Vancouver. And I became the spokesperson. Someone else handled the website, and we just did our best to try and get on the radar of the sort of media in Vancouver, because it seemed like a one-sided story about always about harm reduction, but never really talking about what are we actually doing here with all these drug addicts all over the city, people walking around bent over, sitting in the rain, the mess that the city had become. And that was the beginning. And then through that, I started meeting more and more people. And then I was asked to run as the Conservative candidate in a by-election in my home riding where I grew up, Vancouver-Colchena, in the spring of 2022. And I ran in that by-election. We knew I wouldn't win, but I believe I was the first Conservative Party candidate to run in that riding in something like 57 years. So astonishingly, we only had about 3 weeks, and most of that time was spent just getting nomination signatures. And I think I only door knocked for about 2 or 3 days. And we actually pulled off 6% of the vote in that little election back then. And I was up against Kevin Falcon at the time. That's why there was
he had just won the BC Liberal leadership in like 22, and this was his way into the legislature.
Yeah, and Andrew Wilkinson was stepping down, and Kevin Falcon needed to run in that by-election, and he won, of course. And then when the general election happened in 2024, I ran again, and I won. And so I now am the MLA for Vancouver-Colchena. I'm still that MLA, but as the history unfolded, I got expelled from the BC Conservative Party not too long after we started in the legislature. It was March of last year, and that was over the 215 grave story out of Kamloops. I was the AG critic, one of the two AG critics for the Conservative Party. I made my first ex-post I had ever made in my life on that issue, because there was a lawyer at the named Jim Heller who was now suing the Law Society of British Columbia for defamation. Essentially, they had labeled him a racist in some documents they'd put out when he was complaining about mandatory course materials at the Law Society, which still were claiming that there were 215 bodies found at the Kamloops Indian Residential School when there had not been. And he was pointing out that the Court of Appeal of British Columbia had even said these were potential burials, and he wanted the word potential added, and this is where the storm exploded at the Law Society of British Columbia.
Yeah, and like he wanted a really, really mild change. Like that's almost, and it's still a bit of an obfuscation of the truth to even say there's potential graves, but he's just asking for like the bare minimum alteration to the actual course materials, and that was enough for them to like go like full on trying to smear him when this did not even need to be public at all. It was like a private request that they do this, wasn't it?
It was, and the reason that I felt it was super important to comment on this was that The truth at the Law Society, and this has always been, we have to have truth at the Law Society or we're not going to have it anywhere. And we can't have subjective truth. We have to have truth that's measurable, provable, and verifiable, that people can see that there's truth. And this was the problem. And the Law Society has really gone off course here. Of course, subsequently now they've actually amended those materials, if you can believe it, after they've fought Jim Heller's defamation suit tooth and nail. They've actually corrected the course materials, but they've continued to fight him. It's a shocking development. This man deserves a medal for what he did, and he's just being abused by his own Law Society. It's terrible. And I feel badly for Jim Heller, but thank goodness that he had the courage to come forward and point this out, because it's shocking that other lawyers didn't come forward with this complaint as well. But on this issue, you can see what happens when you speak out on it. You get labeled, destroyed, tossed around like a rag doll out there by the media, and it's a terrible experience.
And I should probably do this at this point in the video, but if people haven't yet watched the documentary Making a Killing, we go into the story of Jim Heller and the Law Society, as well as the former Abbotsford teacher, Jim McMurtry, who is a OneBC candidate, and all the other stuff involving the Kamloops Indian Residential School and the claims of bodies and many other claims that it debunks. Fantastic documentary. I assume many of you have watched it, but if you haven't, it will be pinned in the at the top of the comments below if you guys want to go check it out. Share it with your friends, do all that great stuff. But going back to the issue that ended up having John Rustad kick you out of the BC Conservatives, it almost feels quaint at this point that this is something that anyone would have a problem with, because since then, it's almost become, rightfully so, the new vogue to just to stand up to media bullies, to institutional bullies who are trying to make you basically repeat the untruth of Kamloops. But I actually want to almost wheel it back a little bit more, because it wasn't exactly out of nowhere that the BC Conservatives did this. Not like it wasn't blindsiding to you that they specifically kicked you out, but we both worked on the last BC provincial election for the Conservatives. I was a campaign manager and an organizer. Obviously, you were a candidate, now an MLA. But I remember we were talking back in like December of 2024 about why is everything suddenly changing in the party? Why is there suddenly all this messaging control? And there starts to develop a small clique around the leader of certain MLAs whose opinions are recognized and certain ones whose opinions are not recognized. Can you maybe describe what the culture shift was at that time between December and March when you were finally pushed out?
Yes. When we first got together, when the caucus first met, things seemed okay at first. And then what we started realizing as we spent more time together and started having caucus meetings, that party was a mess. It was so divided. I used to call it sort of like the Frankenstein party, because they took parts and they tried to put together people that just didn't belong together. And it became clear very quickly that there was going to be one side of the room that was holding forth. And it seemed like the more people with more BC Liberal points of view were going to be holding forth in that caucus. And the Conservatives, the true Conservatives like I was, and there was quite a large group of us, were being iced out and shoved aside. And our views were quickly being told that's not acceptable. That's not where we're going with this anymore. And it was really a shock to someone like me, who had campaigned on all of the platform that the Conservatives had put out there, and then to find out that we're not really doing that anymore. And unbeknownst to a lot of us, the platform was even being changed behind our backs. I mean, people might wonder, well, how could that happen? Well, when you're busy, you're trying to get elected, your whole life is changing. You've been elected, you're going through this. You're not watching every little movement of the machinery behind you. You're expecting that all stays the same, but changes were being made behind our backs, and we weren't being told this. And then we'd be hit with questions like, why has your platform changed? How come you're not talking about this or that anymore? And we'd be caught blindsided by this. And
I find this practice so weaselly that the Conservative, I guess, leadership, the establishment of the party was engaging in. There's a difference between has the website changed and has your behavior changed? Because so often it would be this kind of subtle march. It wasn't that the party would come out and declare that they no longer care about DRIPA and they no longer will push back on UNDRIP. they just simply don't talk about it that much. If they're pushed, they'll say, well, of course it's in the platform. But then in other interviews, like we actually had this happen, this was back during the summer. You had the executive director of the BC Conservatives just say, like, well, we're actually not sure if that's like a hard and fast thing that we actually will repeal anymore. That's going to be a free vote. And it's like a free vote. It's a platform plank, but that was confirming what we had been saying for a while, and we were told that we were being too critical. Oh, no, see, it's still part of the platform. And then they come out and they're like, well, we're not really sure if we're going to do that. And now we actually have a BC Conservative leadership race going on where it's like, yeah, everyone says they want to get rid of DRIPA. These are the same people who'd criticize people like you for bringing it up too much.
I know, it's funny how back then, like, it started with the Kamloops Residential School, the story about these graves, and then it just moved on, and everything I said about the Indigenous file became, constantly called a racist, denialist, and all these things. There was just constant labeling. And now what do we have? After the Cowichan decision, the claim that's being mounted against Kamloops City and Sun Peaks Mountain and the adjacent mine, the Ajax mine, and then we've got the Gitsan ruling. Now everybody's saying, now the Conservatives are safely, they feel safe to say, DRIPA has to go. They weren't saying that before. And now even David Eby is saying, we have to amend DRIPA. Whereas I was supposedly a racist for raising these things, but it's okay when they do it. It's incredible to watch the pattern of this. And I think that you've used a really important word here that we need to use more often. It's weaselly. It's weaselly, and the electorate is so sick of politicians saying they're going to do one thing and they don't do it when they get in there, and it is weaselly. And I refuse to ever be a weasel word lady, and I will keep speaking what's straight up, unscripted, and I'm not going to be sitting here with talking points. It's very clear what needs to happen in this province. It's obvious. We're in big trouble with this DRIPA thing.
And really what you do is usually proven out in the long run. And I see so many people, and it's oftentimes, certain campaign mercenaries or whatever, that when somebody says the right thing, that, who usually they're working for, one or two posts, suddenly they're the ones who's going to save us all. It's like, wait a few months, wait a year and see if they actually still do that. Because John Rustad, to his credit, in the last provincial race, and even before it, started talking about DRIPA. And then after the race, stopped talking about it. A lot of people could start doing the right thing and stop doing the right thing a bit later. And we should, maybe, you have to judge them, by their fruits and what they actually end up doing when they're in a leadership position, or when they are an MLA and have the ability to say something when they're given questions. And so far, all these people are running on track records that they do not possess. They only did it after someone else started doing it, or they only did it when the issue became so severe you couldn't not say something. Because we don't truly believe that Eby would be doing this if there wasn't that mining decision that basically was going to shut down all mining.
Yeah. Well, I knew that the party was in serious trouble when I remember we had a swearing in ceremony one evening in Victoria, and it was exciting for all of us. We were being sworn in. A ton of us, we had never been there before. And that night, John Rustad arranged for Alia Warbus to have her own special swearing in ceremony that none of us got. She had her own dad, Stephen Point, come in and speak to all of us. And she also got her own drummers and her own celebration to when she got sworn in. And the rest of us, there was supposed to be there should be nothing special about any of us. We're a big, huge team. She got a special ceremony, and it was a shock to a lot of us. And her dad, Stephen Point, came in and spoke to us that night about reconciliation and how we have to keep reconciling. He spoke to us about climate change. And there was another topic he jumped into as well. And I thought, what is going on here? Why are we being lectured by somebody who's not even involved in the legislature right now? This is the father of one MLA. And he's here talking about how proud he is of his daughter. Well, my late father would have been proud of me too, just like all of our fathers were proud of us. And it seemed really a bad move to start things off. And I remember thinking, this is not good. We're already being what we now fondly call tone policed and told what we better be on side with. And that, I think, was the first signal to me where trouble was coming. And I spoke to John about it. I said, why are you doing this? This is just woke politics and we shouldn't be doing this. He goes, oh, no, it's not woke. We just don't want to be attacked by the other side, and it's really good. And anyway, it was just that was the beginning, and the caucus meetings just developed into almost like brawls. I've
Yeah.
never seen men yelling at each other, swearing. There was one MLA who regularly swore at people, screamed at them. There were people crying. I mean, it was just, I've never been in a workplace like this before, honestly.
And going back to what like John was articulating there by saying, well, no, we need the special introduction for Alia Warbus with her father because, it gets the media off her backs. It's like, well, I think this is proving that eventually the duck and run tactics literally become what you believe. You can't keep doing something forever and not eventually have that infect the way that you think. It's like, it's symbolic what you're doing by having her with that special introduction with the drums and all the inspiring speech that nobody else got. Eventually that's going to become part of your ideology, that this person, simply based on their background, is more important than other people, which means that when they say something, it matters more. And that leads into you getting removed from the party because Alia Warbus basically, called you disgusting and all this other stuff about how you're, we're going to debate like what are you and she's saying, like, we're going to debate the truth or something like that, but even though her brand of the truth doesn't really have a lot of truthiness to it. But
well, she I mean, she became it was just a terrible time. I remember being, wow, this is the way politics rolls. I guess I'm not a fit over here, but that's what happened. And and all the rest is history. I mean, we've now moved forward, and now everybody's talking about the file. And people have said, I've had journalists ask me, do you think you focus too much on this issue? Have you become a one issue person? And I always say, look, this one issue, this one file, this one department is touching on every aspect of our lives in BC now. There's nothing this file doesn't touch.
And it's one of the big line items of the budget now.
Yes, it is.
It's just
and not only that, we're watching in the name of this file, quote unquote, reconciliation. We are now seeing street names changed, bridge names changed. We're seeing parking places being special for only certain people of Native ancestry. They get, even the wheelchair things are being moved over so that there's free parking for certain people based on their ancestry. We've got parks being closed. We've got, like, it's just going on. And, we're also hearing now that there's a movement. They're starting to call it as currently known as British Columbia. And I'm telling you, the next thing that's coming is BC is going to be renamed the Coast Salish Territories. That's what's coming next. I can almost predict it with absolute certainty. And Vancouver will no longer be Vancouver. And my view is this all needs to stop, because we've never had a full discussion about what British Columbians want on this. I don't remember being asked that. I was a voter, and this is not what I want. And there's never been a full discussion about it. And the sense I'm getting is that all of these plans about, they talk about reconciliation, but the dark underbelly to this is actually decolonization and indigenization. Those are the real things that are happening here. And so that's why you're seeing these things happening that don't seem to make any sense. Why are we spending money changing street signs when we can't even run ER rooms right now? Like, it doesn't make any sense, Wyatt. It's
and the name changes do matter, because like you've previously said in another speech of the legislature, you're slowly grooming yourself into the idea that this is not really yours by doing land acknowledgements, by changing the names of things, and by alienating people from their communities, naming schools after things that nobody can actually pronounce without having to have special rules and whatnot. Like, this does matter, and this actually kind of connects to the new tagline that we've rolled out as a party at OneBC. It's like, at some point there needs to be a party that just stands up for the things normal people think. We're the BC party for normal people.
Yeah, and I don't want to be called normal people.
Yeah, it's like, but the thing is that even with the Conservatives, even then, it's kind of tinkering along the outsides. Let's modify reconciliation a little bit so it's a little bit less offensive to the sensibilities of normal people. It's like, well, normal people just want it done, and normal people just want everyone treated like individuals. And that's a funny thing in all this. It's bad for Indigenous people. We effectively have stuck them on what are Soviet states, where they don't own any of their own property on reserves. People don't know this. On their own reserves, they do not own their own property. and they're effectively almost bribed into not developing and by the government. It's kind of like this web where it's both the government and its band councils oppressing regular indigenous people and then doing this all in the name that they're going to help them. And it's like, they're not. The life expectancy of indigenous people has fallen 6 years since the NDP took over, which sounds impossible. That sounds like what should be happening in an actual genocide that's going on.
Yes.
But no, the genocide was in the past when, education was provided in an imperfect way, as it always is whenever education is provided by the government.
That's right. And we are watching this falling life expectancy is a shocker. And the fact that the majority of kids in foster care are from Indigenous communities, the fact that the fentanyl deaths in the Indigenous communities are way higher than they should be. So you ask yourself, you're worrying about what happened 100, 150 years ago, but you're not. Let's focus on what's happening right now. The absolute tragedy of the life on reserve for a lot of people, the unfairness they're subjected to by their chiefs and council. Let's just call it what it is. It's unfair to subject these people to living in a communist environment. They don't own their own property. It's centrally controlled. And if you try and ask any questions of the chief and council, you get punished. And that punishment can take many different forms. It can be being fired from your job in the council office. It can be your child not being picked up on by the school bus. It can be having benefits cut, or it can be having suddenly you're getting complaints against you for something going on your property. And these are the kinds of things. It's retaliation, and you learn really quickly that you better just be quiet. Go back to your house, be quiet, and don't say anything. And this is terribly unfair. And so I think one of the big things that Canadians and British Columbians in particular are probably feeling right now is that the generosity they felt and the desire to help our Indigenous people, because everybody wants that. I don't know a Canadian who doesn't want that, a better situation in this regard. They are saying, okay, now we have spent so much money on this. It's not improving, it's getting worse. So what is really going on here? Where's the money going? What is happening here? How could this be possibly still in this condition when we have been working on this file since I was, this has been going on for 50 years now, trying to improve this. And it's gotten worse.
Here's a great example. I'm not going to name a particular band, but you will have bands out there where the population on reserve is around 650 to 700 people. And we know that they will have budgets per year given to them by the government of $25 million. And you and I actually last night, just for the fun of it, did the calculation. And it's like, how much money would that be per person if we just divide the money up and gave it to them? And it's like $35,714. Let's just assume we have to pay the accountant the extra $700 from each person in order to make it all work and split it up. Or maybe it's even only $32,000 per person because we still need a central office who deals with a few extra issues. This is a band. Some of these bands are right next to major cities, or at least medium-sized cities, right next door. Opportunities are there. Each person, the whole band itself, gets a $25 million budget that is not for anyone else who lives in the area who's not Indigenous. And somehow the poverty rates are extremely high because when the government starts managing people's lives, it's only going to get worse. It's it's the old line, if the government managed the Sahara Desert, there'd be a shortage of sand.
That's right. That's right. That's exactly right. That's a good one. I like that.
Yeah. Well,
it's true. I mean, this is the problem. I mean, the money, what can we say? That is actually $35,000 a year, for example. There's some people that's their household income, okay, in Canada. And then there's no tax paid on that money either. So the whole thing is a mess and it needs a complete overhaul. Everybody knows it. But the big problem we're facing is so many politicians don't want to talk about it because I think this topic is probably the biggest hot potato in Canada politically. They're terrified of speaking of it. Have you heard even Poilievre or Mark Carney even talk about this yet? No, not even a word.
I was heartened, at least recently, Poilievre said that we just need to build pipelines and completely bypass consultation. That's been a big improvement. And by the way, that big improvement started here in BC with OneBC. We're fine to have to lead. We just want people to eventually follow.
Yes, I call them leading from behind. So we're leading, and we're sort of doing the dirty work and raising the issues that nobody else wants to. And then they poke their head out when they think it might be politically safe. The Overton window has shifted adequately for them to poke their head out and take a position on these things. So this situation, the other big hot potato would be like, things like private healthcare that we desperately need in Canada for it to be allowed, so that people stop leaving the country to get the healthcare they need elsewhere. They can stay home and pay for it, keep the money here. But there are several sacred cows in Canada that you're simply not allowed to talk about. And this has to stop, because Canadians need it to be discussed. They need to have someone talking about it. And whenever we're not talking about it, people, they disconnect. They get cynical about the political system, and they get understandably frustrated. That was me too. That's why I'm in politics, because I was frustrated. I used to ask myself, how come the politicians aren't talking about the stuff that needs to be talked about? And now I've learned what happens to you when you try and stick to the truth and deal with issues. You get in big trouble in Victoria or in any party. And, it takes guts, and it hasn't been fun being me sometimes. I mean, it's been unpleasant at certain times, and yet I have the joy of actually being a person now who will speak truth, and you can trust me that I will speak the truth, and nobody can make me stop doing that.
No, I think I've rabbit holed us away from the story I wanted to talk about, but I found our path back into the storyline I was wanting to tell here, because I've had the comments like this in the past, as somebody who, again, helps manage OneBC. You get people saying, well, why are you guys doing this? Is this not splitting the vote? Is this not just letting the BC NDP win in some way? And the thing there's a couple things that I think we need to address here. One, it's the ideology. We've already kind of covered this. Things would have not gone in the more positive direction on DRIPA and on the reconciliation industry grift if you did not start doing what you're doing and have your own vehicle to do it from. But also, I want to go back to where I took us off the trail of the story, and that's going to how the BC Conservative Party was run and the AGM that occurred right before that you were removed from the right from the party caucus. I can start this one off because I was actually there. The BC Conservatives, and it's been proven by the way that they were doing the leadership review for John Rusted, it was blatantly rigged. I've had people admit this to me who are still on side with the BC Conservatives. They were revoking people's memberships left and right. They bust in over 100 guys just to vote for the slate John Rusted wants. The problem is right now in politics is that if a party does not feel like it needs to provide the voters what they're demanding, it will just keep ignoring them until there is a threat. And even still, they still just want us to basically dry up and go away so that they can go back to business as usual. And really, they're still mostly operating business as usual right now. I know you weren't present there, but it got to the point where I literally took a photo of the people being bussed in and had the then chief of staff of the caucus side, Azim Jawani, trying to intimidate me for taking issue with blatant voter fraud. Maybe it's technically legal, but only in the internal party realm where you can effectively get away with whatever you want. But that was a major one, and that's how I think you can probably attest to the fact we've had tons of people join us in the aftermath of the disrespect of the AGM.
Yep. What went on in the AGM was disgusting. And this is precisely the behavior of political parties that turns people off, including myself, to say, what are you doing? If you can't even be honest in the way you run your AGM, why would we ever trust you to run the public purse or foreign policy in Victoria? You're just all for yourselves and trying to guarantee an outcome. This is not democracy. It's not okay. You need to win on your merits and stop trying to rig the game. It's terrible. And
these same people who rigged the AGM, by the way, are in fact running the current BC Conservative leadership race. So,
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Great. Well,
a lot of confidence.
I can't imagine anything's changed there, because this is their modus operandi. This is what they do. They try and determine the outcome they want, and then they structure the game to make sure that they get that outcome. And I don't understand this at all. Why not just live or die on the way you actually conducting yourselves? If you've got good policy, you're going to get elected. Let the people choose. But this is the control we're under. Wyatt, you're way more well versed in politics. You've been doing this for a lot longer than I have, but I've learned a lot, and I've realized how the people behind the scenes run so much of what goes on in politics. I had no idea. I used to wonder why things were always going so sideways, and now I've realized there are all these backroom operatives who have absolutely no principles whatsoever, and all they care about is their own paycheck, their own power tripping, and a lot of them don't even have proper careers or things they've done before to like credentials. They haven't been out working for 40 years. They don't know, they're in the back room and they're just like saying, I just want to keep my job. And that's not the way it should run. It's very disappointing, but I've learned a lot.
It was incredible how so many MLAs seem to not be able to operate without the opinion of one of these backroom actors who it's like, well, they're only going to tell you things that benefit them. But people, when they get to the legislature, it's almost like they get tight, they clam up, and they're uncomfortable because they're a fish out of water. And so they just go back to listening to the people who told them what to say and do during the campaign. And they're not, because it's that generic thing that's said about politics. People are controlled because of money or because of other, influences in the back room. It's less influences. Sometimes it's just fear and incompetence. Somebody does not feel confident to speak for themselves. And so they just keep relying on the same people who helped get them elected. It's not because of money. It's not because they're being bribed or that someone's putting pressure on them. They genuinely don't think that they have the ability to speak. And I think a lot more MLAs need to find their voice and realize, no, you have something to add here. Say the things that you think need to be said. Stop asking that person's permission who's never put their name on a ballot in their lives to say to see what you should be doing.
That's exactly right. I mean, I often say when we got over there was sort of this wide open stage of what we were allowed to talk about. And then as we got over there, that narrowed to this couple of issues that you were safe to talk about, fentanyl and problems in the hospitals. And those were, like, oh, that's controversial. I mean, everybody knows those are easy questions. It's harder to talk about the things that are more on the fringe, like what is a woman? Or do we want the cultural issues like SOGI, DEI in our institutions, land acknowledgements being forced on everybody, flags
temporary foreign workers
country at public buildings, and this kind of thing. I mean, those are really important topics, but you find yourselves intimidated out of talking about them because they take a safety route. And I mean, there has to be, I know there has to be discipline in parties, but what it should have been is like our party stands for these 5 or 7 issues, and we never even had that solid core base. We couldn't even get there because there was so much fighting about even core issues like SOGI, DEI, land acknowledge, like these kinds of things should have been cast in stone, irrevocable. This is what we believe in, and no nibbling at the edges. But
and even on some, even on things like SOGI, where you think it should be just a slam dunk issue, the Conservatives actually went into the election basically talking about how all this material in classrooms and this instruction is just absolutely inappropriate. It's disgusting. And then after the election, it became, well, it's not sexually inappropriate, it's age inappropriate. I'm like, that's a really weird distinction to start making as soon as you take office, that, well, maybe we just need to restrict this only for high school students. Dude, I don't think 30-year-olds, 60-year-olds, I don't think there's any age bracket that this stuff is appropriate to be viewing. And but now we're already starting to retreat and starting to just tinker. And I hate, as somebody who has a master's degree in public policy, all that degree taught me was I hate policy people. They genuinely just think if we tinker around the corners of really bad policy enough, eventually we will ascend into nirvana and utopia combined. Everything will be perfect forever because we have passed the right combination of regulations to make everyone's lives better. It's like, it's just not how it works. We'll eventually get into like what the OneBC party believes in, but if you're a traditional conservative, you can probably just whatever you probably think is probably what we believe. It's simple, hey, let's have less regulation, all that. But now we can move ahead in the storyline because you talked about how the narrowing of the issues happened under the Conservatives, and then what happened once you were free from that as an independent and then OneBC MLA, and how was the reaction in the legislature to you just doing whatever you want after that?
Well, it was funny because I heard that they all got lectured big time and screamed at and yelled at. And if you ever do what Dallas Brodie did, you will be sent to political Siberia, just like we've done to her. We'll destroy you. We'll, and they intimidated everybody. And a lot of people who are my friends there still, they wouldn't even look at me. They wouldn't even turn their heads to look at me. They were so, I could tell they had been just dominated and bullied into a behavior that was like, we're not even going to acknowledge her existence. So
We kept calling it Stockholm syndrome in the office.
I know it was. And so, I was lucky to have Tara working with me, and we formed a party. And once we got, at first it was being an independent's really hard. You don't have a lot of presence in the legislature. You get a decent budget, but you're sort of on your own and you have to find your way. And once we formed the party, it was really good because then Tara and I, we had a question every day in the House, which was a precedent established when the NDP made a deal with the Green Party. And it used to be that you needed 4 MLAs to form official party status in the House, but for the Greens, they changed the rules so that you only needed 2. And so Jeremy and Bob Botterill and Jeremy Valera would get a question every day. And so Tara and I were getting questions every day, which was terrific. And we started, and then we also learned how to introduce bills, which gave us an opportunity to really present our platform views and what we believed in. And because you have to find ways in the House to get your voice across within the rules that are there. And so I believe in always, stay within the lines, color within the lines, but color boldly, and do the best you can with the opportunities available to you in that legislature. And that's what we were doing.
But then you got I want to get to the point where House of the sort of the, not the House of Commons, I guess, but just the legislative chamber, because you discovered how to make an NDP's head explode.
Oh yeah.
There seems to be a very easy formula to getting people to freak out, because the one thing that's kind of sad about the legislative chamber, the federal House of Commons is really well mic'd up. If someone screams something from the other corner, you will hear it. In the BC legislature, still using like audio technology from like the 1950s, and so you will be sitting there, and if people ever watch it, sometimes you'll have like you or Tara would have like looked up and like looked across quizzically, because you have some NDP people who you wouldn't normally expect like screaming at you.
Oh, yeah.
And so that I've known you from working at the legislature with you, coming back downstairs the first few times and kind of feeling a bit frazzled because some of them cannot handle themselves at all, like ready to jump the table and come at you with like knives.
Oh yeah, well, Rick Glumac was one of them. Oh, he couldn't, like when Tara introduced her bill about stopping transgender surgeries on children. I mean, I couldn't believe it. Like the explosion of anger, and it was really palpable. And then the whole group sitting around him, Aurora and Shaw, they're just like constantly while you're speaking, they're like, oh, she's so disgusting. You can hear what they're saying. She's disgusting. She's a racist. You're gross. Like they're just hurling insults at you across the room. And it's really, it's distracting while you're trying to talk in the legislature because, I'm used to being in court. I'm not afraid of speaking and making my arguments, but surely, but I mean, you just get used to it after a while and you literally tune it out and keep going. And you like at first it was like you'd stop almost and think, what did they just say? And then you just get used to just talking right through it because people, if you want to clip the piece that you're saying in the House, people can't hear what they're saying. So if you're stopping and looking around, people won't know what you're doing. But you're right. The things that are being said in there are crazy. I mean, look at Eleanor Sturko.
My favorite part is still Eleanor Sturko trying to chirp you from behind. And then you like kind of moved over and like looked straight at her. Like, are you the speaker? And you like kind of like, it kind of like had that like kind of look on her face of like getting actually called out, because everyone thinks that they're just gonna like chirp you and try and distract you from behind, and as soon as you turned around it got very real.
Well, it did get real because actually what she was doing there was not her job. She didn't like the intro. You're allowed, whenever you ask a question in question period, you have a brief opportunity or a short time to well, Millibar pushes it to sometimes over a minute and 15 seconds. I've timed him many times. His preambles to his questions go on and on and on and on. If I go past 15 seconds with my preamble, I have, people, Sturko started to say, question, please. And that's not her job. The speaker has the right to say member question. And that's what the speaker will do, and that's his job. That's why I was listening to this going, I don't buy into this. I'm going to ask you, are you suddenly the speaker? And I'm not going to put up with that stuff. That's
you calling David Eby an anarchist, and that very nicely done point of order was a lot of fun. Where you just because if he's going to keep calling you a racist without evidence, well, we have way more evidence he's an anarchist and a communist. And you started, and that was a very fun point of order where it caused a lot of buzz around the legislature for a few days because they kind of realized that we actually we have to rein in our people and how they're talking, or what's to stop any MLA from just absolutely ripping another person to shreds because you can say, well, I'm describing what she's doing. I'm not saying she's a rape. Like, come on. And also, it's just without evidence, so they're just acting as complete smear artists.
It became a total smear. And the thing is, there are rules in the standing orders about you're not allowed to use offensive language against other members. You can yell, even just watch the British Parliament. There's always a lot of guffawing and it's a rowdy room. There's no question. I don't mind people being rowdy in there. In fact, I think there could be even almost a little bit more of that. But the actual personal shots at people, that's what I was calling David Eby out for, is this is offensive language. And I said to the speaker, if he's going to be allowed to do that, then there should be no limits on the offensive words I can use against him. And I have many. Those were only 4 I offered: stupid, incompetent, financially illiterate, and an anarchist. I could give you 25 more words to describe him.
And I actually wouldn't mind us being more like the UK system, where you can be a little bit more offensive. But the problem is that, again, what happens in the BC legislature is the speaker will correct members' language who aren't the NDP, and the NDP can be as offensive as they want, and they'll always have a cute excuse for why it doesn't matter. So once you did that, then the speaker kind of realized that he's going to get destroyed in the media eventually if he keeps letting this go on, because it's getting pretty obvious what's going on. Again, whether it's an NDP supporter or not, or even an NDP supporter would probably see what they're saying. That this is getting pretty unparliamentary in a lot of ways. But I want to talk about, because we kind of invoked it a little bit by bringing up how Peter Millibar was doing question period. That's the funny thing. You as having a question, even back before when you were just an independent and you only had the question every 3 weeks, and we're currently in that position again, but we're figuring it out. We know what to do for getting our message out.
We've got plans.
Yeah, absolutely. But even when you only had a question every 3 weeks, the questions had far more impact than anything the Conservatives were doing, because this is the ridiculous nature of how the Conservatives operate. They will pick a theme of the day, and the theme of the day is crime, and it becomes like a sing along where they're like, I don't like crime. How about you? I don't like crime. And then they pass it off to one of their MLAs, and they're like, someone got punched in the face in my riding. Will you apologize? And the minister will get up and well, I'm very sorry to Mrs. So-and-so, and we have this new program. And then they would be like, I don't like crime. How about you? And then they go to another MLA, and they're like, someone was kicked in the face in my ride. It's like, guys, who is this convincing? But the thing is that it's the BC Conservatives communications was being run by consultant brained people who think that the way that you win a narrative fight is by just repeating the same issue over and over again. I'm like, guys, this is not how the media works. Voters are not going to sit down and watch 7 hours of you guys for over the last year asking the same question over and over again, and they'll eventually be convinced by that. Either they agree with you now or they don't agree with you, and you just need to mobilize people. But you and Tara were asking unique questions every day. Sometimes it'd be on the same subject matter, but it would be on a different angle to that subject matter, not this apologize for ERs being closed. And I always think about that, well, what's the Conservatives going to do about that? They don't want to have bring in private delivery of healthcare. That's the only way we're going to fix this. Slashing administration hard and bringing in private options. But they don't want to do that.
Yeah. That's true. And I used to be so frustrated watching them wasting their question period that way. I'm thinking, my God, you guys, you've got whatever number of questions they get, 12 or whatever the Conservatives would have, and they would waste them. And I, of course, every question I got was like precious metal to me. I'm like, this is my chance to do work for the people and ask the questions, even if they're unpopular and difficult and like, you know, tricky. Like, you have to ask them, because we're talking about public money. We're talking about what the people need, and we have to use these questions because it's really the only opportunity you get to hold the government's feet to the fire. You know, the committees are a joke. Nothing really happens in them. So question period is extremely important. And I would just, and you know, when they would ask 7 questions in a row of Josie Osborne, the health minister, I mean, you know, love her or hate her, I gotta say, she is very good at what she does in there, and she's super good at running out the clock. So every answer she gave sounded exactly the same, and they just let her say the same thing over and over again 7 times. So they're not getting anywhere. And I don't know why they adopted that strategy, but you know, we really tried to take our questions and make sure we made maximum use of that moment to put a question to the government and make them answer. And you know, you can't make them answer, but you have to, you know, these questions need to be cutting right through and saying, look, people want to know this, and you have a job to do as opposition too, by the way. You're not there just to be popular and make new friends. You're there to do a job.
Yeah. And here's something I want to show on screen, just to back up the point that we're having an impact and people are actually, like, this is actually having a massive policy and cultural effect on the rest of Canada. This is something that just happened recently in regard to the Kamloops issue. The headline here is Ottawa ordered to release Kamloops grave records after access law breached. And effectively, the privacy commissioner federally has had to call out the Kamloops band out in Kamloops, as well as the federal government, for not actually releasing progress reports for the excavations that were supposed to be done for the money. So hack MPs like Grant Wade, whatever his name is, they can say whatever they want about the cultural sensitivity of it. Even the federal privacy commissioner knows that they were given $12 million combined. I'm not sure if that's all the federal money. It is a little bit of, you know, provincial and federal money combined, but they know that's what they paid for, and they're looking for progress reports, and the government that's too woke to push for it is now being literally held accountable by a judge, saying that you can't just give money out and then have 0 actual deliverables that they have to give you. And so this would not be something that would happen without you speaking out, without the Making a Killing documentary, because even these people who live in liberal bubbles realize eventually normal people are going to start asking the exact same questions. And this is not just asking questions for the fun of it. These are questions with very easy answers that they should be able to ask. And the fact that there's no answers is concerning.
When you're taking public money, all questions are on the table. All information should be released about what's going on with that. There's no privacy when you're taking public money. That's the way it is. And if you're the Kamloops band actually demanded funding to do the excavations. It wasn't just the federal government paid over $320 million for diggings across the country. The Kamloops band received specifically $12.1 million. And the money, I take it, has all been spent, but no digging has been done. And so this is now coming, we're now really getting down to the wire here. We're going to see the progress reports. Did you do any digging? And the sense is there hasn't been any digging done. I mean, they've actually in so much as said that because they don't want to disrupt. They say they shouldn't have to do that. Well, you know, of course, I beg to differ on that. If you're accusing the country of mass murder, you have to provide the evidence. And that is the same for any crime scene. And, you know, you can't just, and then people have said to me, oh, but you shouldn't have to dig up your own grandparents to prove that they died. I'm like, no, if I'm saying my mother was murdered and I've buried her in my backyard, then and I accuse someone of murdering them, I have to produce the evidence that there was a murder. And even if your parents don't die of a murder, you still have to, you can't just take the body and put it wherever you want. You have to get a death certificate. It has to be registered properly, obviously. So this is a silly argument that somehow this is indecent to require there be evidence of this. It's got to be done. People want the truth, and I think it's time for the band and this whole industry to just say, we need to admit we've made a mistake here. We shouldn't have taken this far. We're not going to dig, or we're going to dig, and it should, by the way, the digging should also be done by a properly constituted investigative group. You don't just allow people to go into a crime scene and start digging around in there. It needs to be done properly. And so, I think that we're getting down to the truth here, and it's going to become very uncomfortable. The longer you cling to a lie like this, the farther you're going to fall, and pride is involved, and it's terrible. Wyatt,
and you've been calling on for the Kamloops band, and what is her first name? It's this Chief Casimir, that they should be handing all the money back plus interest to the provincial and federal government.
It was earmarked for a purpose. So if you're not going to use it for that, then refund it, and you have to pay interest on it. You've now had it for 4.5 years. That's a long time to have someone else's money. And we're not talking about $12,000 here, and that would even be too much. We're talking about $12.1 million. This is a staggering amount of money. A staggering amount of money. Why was that amount even needed to do this digging?
One may actually go all the way and say the T word, that this sounds like theft, because that's what usually happens when you exploit a government program. This happened during COVID when people lied about running a business, and I actually have, I have 18 employees and they're all laid off, and I have this much business I usually do, and they were getting subsidies from the government to sustain fake businesses. If they found out you did that, you would be in court, you'd be tried, you might be going to prison for multiple years, and they would even seize some of your assets to pay the money back. But we're in a situation where genuinely the government is so woke that some people are allowed to lie, some people are effectively allowed to steal money, and it's okay because, well, truth and reconciliation, minus the truth and just the reconciliation part. And at some point, people even have to ask, what does reconciliation even mean? Because now we move into another part of the story, and it's the Cowichan decision over land in Richmond, and we have the Kamloops claim over all of Kamloops, and we have the Queen Charlotte Islands issue with Haida Gwaii. This reconciliation thing isn't exactly working out too well, but this is the part of it where people want to push back on even these, or we'll get to this part of the story, but there's the court issue, and then there's also the land that was already being given away by the government voluntarily, much of it actually under the BC Liberals when Rusted was the Indigenous Affairs Minister.
Yes. I mean, we need to stop this. The voluntary transfer of land, money, and power needs to stop immediately. So we need to stop that. And we need to repeal DRIPA, and we need to declare UNDRIP of no force and effect in British Columbia. We need to lobby the federal government, and we need to start asking for a change to Section 35 of the Constitution Act of Canada of 1982. And we need to have all of these reserves start operating as normal townships and municipalities, and normalize the structure on there, and let the Native people own their lands fee simple, and get back to proper land ownership, and not have these like ethno-communist states existing throughout our country. There are only certain people getting better off by that system. I mean, isn't there recently some people being flown out of a reserve somewhere where they don't have good water? Like, this is just happening as we're speaking. I think I just was reading an article about the video. How could this possibly be going on?
There was also that case where a chief was finally forced to actually disclose expenses, because it was the chief and council effectively just looting the band by taking literally millions and millions of dollars that was supposed to be earmarked for actual benefits for people on reserve, and it was just spent on pretty much anything but. And that's not a rarity. That almost seems like it's pretty much the rule, that on a reserve, with the privacy issues that we have, you can't actually ask any questions. And you actually published that, how much it cost to rename, what was it, Trutch Street. And that became that you were the villain despite the fact that before exposing that other people were taking $35,000 to walk 3 blocks over and be at a presentation ceremony for a new name no one can actually pronounce.
And that's just the money we know about that was spent on that little endeavor. Renaming a street, and I've been over there, the people there are not happy about it. They have to change their driver's licenses, their credit cards. Like, it has been, like, some people might have 50 or 60 different places they need to change their address now to something they can't pronounce or deal with. And it's just, anyway, these topics are actually covered. Like, there were 2 extremely brave Indigenous men who appeared in our documentary, the documentary called Making a Killing. And I'm not just sort of like just trying to pander or push this on people, but it is an important documentary to see. I really recommend it because one Indigenous man named Aaron Point, who's from the Musqueam Reserve, came on and spoke openly, took great courage. And another Indigenous man named Robert Louis, who's from the Lower Kootenay Band, came on and spoke to us as well. So don't take it from me that there's a problem on the reserves. Listen to what these men say. And I've been contacted by other Indigenous people. We're getting more and more phone calls, letters, and we're meeting with more and more people who are saying, this is going on in our reserve, this is going on here and there. And these people are frustrated too. So they can call me, say this is racist. It's not racist at all. It's actually fairness and proper discussion about a matter of intense public interest right now. And when we've got this much money going to a file, all questions are on the table. And I keep coming back to that. We have to know the truth because we can't move forward as a country, well, as a province or a country, if we're basing policy on falsehoods and untruth. And I think a lot of people are getting wealthy. We talk about the reconciliation industry, which is comprised of lawyers, accountants, consultants, and developers, and chiefs and counsel. And those people are getting wealthy, but the others aren't. And furthermore, federal government policy isn't supposed to make people millionaires. It's supposed to just make things better and working properly for people. This isn't designed to create a billionaire class. I don't even know how we got off onto this. This is crazy stuff.
Here's a great example as well of something that I actually genuinely think is racist. How random activists, left-wing activists, are able to effectively just say that they speak on behalf of an entire ethnicity. And so we just had an episode of this before, like, Mark Carney went off to bow before Xi Jinping in China, where he met with the coastal First Nations.
Right.
In which it's a organization, a left-wing eco-socialist organization, who is against all oil and gas development, against pipelines, pretty much against any resource development that you could name. And Carney basically took these people seriously and is basing whether or not Canada will build a pipeline on the opinions of left-wing activists who literally represent effectively no actual Indigenous people. And by the way, all Indigenous people are individuals, and we should stop thinking about people like we need to ask all, like, we would obviously find it absurd that if you were in a township, we had to ask all the white people what they think. Or we had to have a council of white people to tell us what white people think. It's like, or everyone probably has different interests because they're human beings. They have different opinions. They have different life experiences. They have different, but the thing is that we have literally our entire economy nationally being stymied by these ridiculous race politics of who you have to talk to get a pipeline through. And half the time you're just talking to leftists, and that's it.
Well, this is a big problem. And, the media did not do its job once again in exposing what's really been going on in British Columbia since starting about 25 years ago, when the Tides Foundation, now called the makeway.org or something, they've changed their name because the heat is turning up, I think. But Tides Canada, which is a subsidiary of Tides Foundation in the United States, and then another group, the Rockefeller Foundation, and then Soros has probably got his tentacles in here as well with his opens. They've been working hard on stopping development in British Columbia for a long time, and I wish they would get out of our province and go mind their own business. And I swear, if I were even premier for one day, I would say, get out of BC. You're not allowed to operate here anymore. We're cutting off all this this stuff coming in from these massive multi-billionaire organizations out of the United States and other places around the world. And mind your own business, because British Columbians want to manage our own affairs, and we can do that just fine without your meddling. And that's what we need to be working on, is getting power back into the hands of British Columbians, because a lot of us are noticing more and more control coming down on us. And it's always a mystery, like, who asked for this? Where did this come from? Why am I being told there's a scarcity of water in British Columbia? That's ridiculous. We have so much water here. Like, my lawn is so wet, I can't even walk on it without sinking. I mean, this is, we are being told how many toilets we can have in our houses. We're being told what cars we should drive. We're being told how much water can come out of our shower head. I mean, this is really going too far. And I don't think anybody ever voted for control of our personal lives like this. If you want to use less water, please go ahead and do that. If you want to pay more taxes, please go ahead and pay more if you want to. If you want an electric car, do it. But we shouldn't be forcing people's lives. And a lot of this forcing is coming from outside entities that are bypassing our normal democratic institutions and contracting out things so that we're finding, like, our cities are changing. Who asked for that bike lane?
I think it's absolutely fair to say that we should be treating organizations like Tides, MakeWay.org, and all these other organizations that are funding eco-activist groups in British Columbia. They should be treated the same way we would treat it if there was a Chinese Communist Party front group operating nonprofits in Vancouver area. If we found it's not a foreign government, but it's effectively a hostile foreign entity operating a nonprofit in your region. It's, lobbying happens. That's fine. But when it's an organization who's effectively being foreign funded to stop up your economy, that's no longer local interest. That is foreign interest basically throwing money at an issue in order to basically stop up development. Because these organizations file what are effectively hostile lawsuits, claims in the court in order to stop up projects. And our current policy effectively allows it. And I think not only should the policy be altered so that you can't challenge every single piece of development that happens, but also your organization has to be publicly registered as a foreign entity so that you can't hide behind the fact that you represent I represent all British Columbians in the trees too.
Yeah. Well, imagine for a second if we found out that there was something called the Trump Foundation that was working here on behalf of, do you think the media would report that? It would be every day, nonstop, all day long. But when it's the Tides Foundation or these other leftist organizations out of the United States, the media does not do its job exposing this. There was one woman who did a lot of work on this named Vivian Krause, I believe, years ago, was exposing all of this. And of course, what did they do? They sued her into the ground, I believe is what happened with her. But she was trying to expose, look, if you can landlock Alberta, they can't develop. And this is the whole point. Lock up British Columbia. It stops anything from flowing. And, they've done a good job. All these things like the Great Bear Rainforest, all of these different campaigns they've done has been nothing but to stop and shut down a province that was built on resource extraction. That's what our province was built on. We were a primary industry province. We could do better to have more manufacturing here and so on. But we need to develop our resources. I mean, Wyatt, right now, apparently we're importing fiber for our sawmills from the United States. This is insane.
We've had people reaching out to us.
There are trees everywhere. We have trees and trees and trees. Like, why would we be importing trees from somewhere else when we've got trees everywhere? And I know a clear cut doesn't look pretty right after it's done, but good things happen after that. The fauna grows up, the deer like the food, they and we now replant, and there are ways to minimize the actual long-term damage of these things, but we need to use our resources. Every other country does. Why should British
Columbia? Apparently we every single tree in British Columbia is pretty much old growth at this point based on the activist definition. And it shows the hypocrisy that they're willing to import what would probably be labeled old growth trees from Northern California and Washington and Oregon. You can get trees from there. Those trees are fine to cut down and process in British Columbia, but you can't cut down the trees that are just kilometers away from the paper mills and the lumber mills. Like, why? And we've had people reach out to us from the lumber paper mill industry saying they've met with the forest minister, Ravi Parmar, and they've told him all the policy issues. They've told him the reconciliation industry hurdles. They've told him about all the environmental regulations making it impossible to cut down a tree. And he'll listen to them and he'll pretend that he cares. And then he'll just go back and keep blaming Donald Trump for everything. Because even though all the mills were shutting down before Donald Trump showed up, apparently it's now all Donald Trump's fault.
Well, that's a convenient deflection. Trump is fighting for America right now, and we should be fighting for British Columbia. But instead, what it feels like when I'm in the legislature is that every discussion, every third word is First Nations or Indigenous. I'm not kidding you. It is, and this is not a high percentage of the population of BC. What about the rest of the people here? And what about the economy? How are we even going to support First Nations if there's no economy? We're running out of money. I mean, the whole thing is so catastrophically flawed that it's going to take a big course correction. It can be done, but we need really, really bold leadership right now. Bold leadership.
And maybe what we can do is go into the specific policy stances that our party's taken, because like it's you said this in another interview with the New Westminster Times. Like the province could literally be turned around and prosperous in like weeks. It literally is very simple, and you can maybe, I guess, go down the list of stuff that already just comes to mind of easy fixes.
Yes. Well, I mean, some easy fixes is immediately let's lower taxes. Let's lower taxes on people so they can keep more of their money. That's a start. Then, but I've had business people say to me, this is so easy to fix. Like and the first thing is like these endless environmental consultations, endless Indigenous consultations, which usually are comprised of more environmental consultations on top of the other environmental consultations that have already been done. And now we're looking at amendments to the Heritage Conservation Act, which is going to strangle development even more. And we have to make our province a place where it's welcoming business in and making it a place where people want to come to invest millions and millions and millions of dollars. It's not cheap to open a mine. And yes, mines do have things that are not, they don't look pretty. They're not always perfect, but you know what? We can't just expect other countries to manufacture for the stuff we want. Why are we okay with them having these things, but not with us? We have to sit here living in a park and everybody else gets all the jobs. That's not going to work anymore. And we can kickstart this. We can do it. And we just need smart people in there just to lead the way and show us how to go forward with this. And
I don't think people realize how absurd the regulations are in British Columbia right now. All regulations and codes added together are 173,000 individual regulations and codes, where in Alberta, right next door, it's only 80,000 on the books. Literally less than half of the ones that are in British Columbia, because it's just become a bureaucratic dictatorship in BC. And it's to the point where like our plan is to cut taxes by 25% across the board, you would literally bring in more revenues if you did that for the government. So even in the most selfish, from a selfish perspective from the government, if they cut taxes, they would bring in more revenues because people would stop leaving the province and more people would invest in it. It's ridiculous. But the thing is that they don't actually understand how the economy works. So they simply think that the more you raise taxes, the more you're going to bring in. And it's like, no, people just leave because people are allowed to leave. We still have that much freedom to be able to move to a different province or to a different country.
Yeah, I mean, people are leaving and capital is leaving. People who can afford to leave are leaving. They are. I have a friend who's a tax lawyer who's just telling me, I said, are you doing a lot of plans for people to leave the province? He goes, all day, every day. People are nervous. This has become people are concerned. What is going to happen with their money, with their properties and so on. And these are legitimate concerns. I mean, we now have a 53% upper tax rate in Canada, and that's just not okay. That means they're working half the year for the government. That's not a good way to go.
And it's even more than that, because if that person owns a business and God forbid it's a big business, you're already paying the combined corporate tax rate of at least 25 or 30% all combined. And then the money that you end up paying yourself at the end of the year is 53%. And then you go to the grocery store and you're paying the 7% PST on top of the GST. And it's like, we could cut all of this.
And that doesn't even get down to the people who do own properties who have to pay property tax, and property tax is paid out of after-tax income. So it's like a double bite. And people, young people are getting discouraged in BC in particular, but in Canada in general, because they can't accumulate any capital anymore. You can't try accumulating even $10,000. Try saving that. It's really hard to do right now when the tax rate is so high. We have to get the taxation under control. And a lot of this is going to involve cutting back the size of government. And I've always believed that people will spend their money better than the government can spend it for them. I have a pet store that I go to, and he was telling me that his business jumps immediately. Like, this is just a small pet store on Broadway. It's not actually not in my riding, but they have fish and gerbils and stuff like that. It's really cute birds. Anyway, when the
don't endorse them, or they'll have a brick thrown through their window because of Dallas.
Yeah, I won't say who. when the tax rebates come, so say tax rebates come back and you get your $300 back. You know what? His business spikes immediately because someone comes in and they can now afford the fish tank that they really wanted, or the new cage for their birds or something. And so that's just based on a refund of $200 to $300 maybe for a tax rebate. So the instant jump to the economy, like, it happens immediately. And in the early 2000s, when Gordon Campbell, who I thought was a good premier, did a good job for a long time here, he cut the income tax. It was a huge cut. Was it 50? It was huge.
Some brackets were 50%, but
it was incredible.
Yeah.
And apparently the instant bounce to the economy, was instant. It didn't take even 2 months. It was boom. People thought, okay, good. I don't need to pay this X amount. And it's much better for the economy than sending it to the government, having us fiddle around with it, and then spend it back out on our political friends. Because I see a lot of waste in Victoria, Wyatt. There's a lot of waste.
And this is the problem too. Like, you can't, and this is what goes back. Honestly, this is probably a big reason why the BC Conservatives didn't end up crossing the finish line in the last election. And also on top of spending donor money horribly during it and wasting cash. The BC Conservative campaign provincially in 2024 was run like Kamala Harris's campaign. Like 50% of the money was on salaries for people that you couldn't tell what they did. But another reason was, like, John did not run on a tax cut. I was waiting for the tax cut to be announced. And it's like, no, we have the Rusted rebate. I'm like, stop this rebate politics. Just cut taxes. Guess what? For the average working class person on a provincial level doesn't actually pay that much income taxes. It's only like 5.6%. That for somebody, that is still a decent chunk of their income because you're struggling with the high costs. But a bigger thing for them is take the PST, take it from 7% to 5%, and then maybe even take it lower than that eventually. Take corporate taxes and cut corporate taxes 25%, because guess what? People shop at the stores paying those corporate taxes. And so even if you're only focused on those making less than 100,000, it will benefit them if the corporation they work for or they shop at is paying less. Like, we have to stop this stupid class warfare type politics where we only want benefits for certain people. Like, you either have to benefit everybody or nobody.
Well, and I've also said, people will say, well, you need to tax the super rich more and more. And I've said to people, look, even if you took away all of Jimmy Pattison's money, even if you took away all the money from the very top business people in British Columbia and just confiscated it all, let's take everything away from them. Let's sell their boats, their cars. Let's take everything away from these incredible people who have built these businesses. It would pay for government for about 3 days. And what do you have then? The money's been pissed away, and now there's no business left. Yeah. And that's the end of it. It's just incredible to think that is a way ahead. But I mean, I know people, they love to launch this class warfare stuff, and it's super dangerous for society. We need the high earners. We need these people who have dedicated their lives. I mean, Jimmy Pattison started selling cars when he was a young guy in college. He's worked his way up, and he's a brilliant businessman.
And remember, the richest person in British Columbia is still the government. Effectively, the premier is always the richest person because they have access to a $98 billion budget. And I'm pretty sure that Jimmy Pattison doesn't have that with all of his assets across Canada still.
Yeah, and people, just because someone says their net worth is this, that money is invested in things, and it's paying for employment, it's giving services, it's doing things. Jimmy Pattison doesn't sit there with buckets of coins in his living room. I mean, he's got it invested in stores and employees and trucks delivering things. And
I even see some of the guys who call themselves like the new right in Canada and in BC politics. They'll be like, "Well, we want middle class tax cuts, but I actually I'm fine with higher taxes on the upper income earners and corporations." I'm like, "Oh my goodness, you don't get it." Some of these new right guys have circled all the way back around to just being socialists again.
I know it's really not a healthy way, and we should be telling people we need these. And if they've worked their way up and they own a nice car or a boat, what's wrong with that? Like, what's wrong with that? If Jimmy Pattison has a nice boat, so he's earned every penny of it. And also, by the way, that big boat, he employs probably 50 people a month just to maintain it. So it's not like it's really, we need to start saying we should celebrate success. We should be happy when people do well, because people who are doing well are employing people and they're spending money and they're going to restaurants and they're buying things and they're buying clothes and they're going on trips and they're going fishing, but this provides employment. And I don't like I don't like anything that smacks of the politics of resentment and jealousy. We need to stop that and encourage people to do the best they can, help the people who are struggling, give them a hand up. But we can't just criticize the people who are the real industrial leaders and the people who are building things here.
It's like the old Margaret Thatcher line that the left would rather the poor be poorer as long as the rich were also less rich, which means that you're just going to make everyone worse off in the long run. I want to get to this list out here just to give people a general sample of the stuff that we're currently running on at the moment. So we have repeal DRIPA, eliminate SOGI, cut taxes across the board 25%, deregulate, build pipelines, defund the reconciliation industry, because it's not just enough to repeal DRIPA. The handouts to these organizations and the power they have needs to just be eliminated. We have celebrate BC's history, cancel woke programs, stop enabling addiction. I like your speech where you talked about how we have to re-stigmatize addiction, which is probably the exact right thing to say. Protect gun owners, oppose mass immigration, which would provincially, it's a little bit tougher to do that. It's federal, but what we can do is start cutting off provincial benefits to non-citizens, because that's the reason you have such a high influx of people. It's so easy to get on benefits in British Columbia right now. And then we have end the abuse of the MAID system, the medical assistance in dying. But that's not exhaustive. We will have more policies that we will be rolling out, like eliminating the step code for buildings in BC for houses, which is requiring you to have it be perfectly environmentally friendly as you're building a house, which means that every house is having hundreds of thousands of dollars added to its development cost.
It's just out of control. And your comments about the regulations earlier, I mean, it just makes my blood boil to think of how many regulations are developed, because with every regulation that's made, there's a bureaucracy that's around that regulation to enforce it against its own citizens. And that's really not their job. We need to let people manage their lives, set a nice baseline of things, make sure that things are working for people so they can run their lives, not just controlling them and forcing them. And I mean,
you'd be like a lawyer to run a hot dog stand at this point in order to not violate a law.
I know. It's really, so I would really like to see, that the regulations be brought down. You bring in one, you have to get rid of three. Let's start there. How about that? You bring in a new one, you have to eliminate three others.
And our general idea is like, in 4 years, maybe let's eliminate 25% of regulations. And even that's a start. Like, that's just a realistic goal for like a 4-year term. But like, even that would not bring BC close to how deregulated Alberta is. That would still actually maybe even not have us below Ontario, which has 120,000 regulations. But that's just demonstrating how bad it is. Only if you add Ontario and Alberta together do you actually get to the BC levels.
Well, it's not funny. I'm laughing just because it's so ridiculous. It's preposterous that we have this many regulations. But this is what happens when you get like government creep just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And 8 years of the NDP is enough to kill any economy. But here we are, and we just got to make sure that we toss them out in the next election, which we never really talked about the whole vote splitting thing. We should.
I kind of went into that. My whole perspective on that is that people can keep saying that that's what we're doing. The party's only growing because people aren't doing what we're doing. We're
Yes.
at 9.5% in the case of a new poll. That one, if Caroline Elliott was the BC Conservative leader, I'm not sure if she's the front runner yet. People say that, but so right now with the front runner of the party, we're effectively rounding up at 10% of the polls. That doesn't happen unless you're talking about stuff nobody else is talking about. So I think that people have to realize there's not going to be an election in 2026. It's unlikely we're even going to have an election in 2027. There's a lot of times for BC politics to sort itself out and for OneBC to keep growing. And right now we're already at a third of what we need to win.
Yeah, and we are growing and we will continue to grow. And I really, really believe in OneBC and what its mission is to really return decision-making to the people of British Columbia. And I think that is resonating. Well, I know it is resonating with people. And we are going to we are doing an important job in British Columbia, or I was doing it with Tara, now not so much, but I still believe that we will be able to operate as a group. There are 3 independents now, and we are bringing important voices to that legislature, and we need to be there. And we are leading, we are at the tip of the spear, and we are leading on the really difficult issues, and we're taking the hits for doing it, but I'm doing this because I really love this province. I love Vancouver. I love British Columbia. We owe it to the people who built this place to preserve and build on what was been done. It is a shame to watch what's happening, and it's just really bad policy. And it could be turned around so quickly. And I keep saying, with the abundant resources we have in this province, we should be the center, like the best place to do business, in the world. Like we could be everything. And I am excited to think that people are waking up to this reality, and we can do this. And I'm an optimist at heart, and I'm going to keep fighting for that.
One more thing on the vote split thing, because I remembered this as the example I was going to use, because I find the attack so cynical, because aren't we currently in a reality where the BC Conservative Party exists and the BC Liberal/United Party took a dirt nap? The same people who are saying, like, oh my goodness, this is vote splitting. It's like, well, you were you also calling out the Conservatives when they were rising and BC United was falling? Are you also gonna like get mad at us if we start actually overtaking them? Like it's just a silly thing to say. As well as the thing I see a lot is that they're like, okay, Dallas Brodie did a great job, but now it's time to hand it all over to this person running for Conservative leadership. This person who's been copying her talking points and watering them down. Yes, they've risked nothing. Yes, they've not actually led on anything, but now it's time to hand it back over. You guys have done enough. Now you can give it over to us. Don't worry. Us people who rig our own AGMs and who kick people out of our caucus and who water down our policy constantly and who literally also attempt to rig our own leadership reviews. Give it over to us. We know what to do with it. No, don't worry. Don't ask any questions.
Yeah.
Just Dallas has done she's good job. Good work. Although we had that interview with Juno News, and Candace Malcolm did a very good interview with the interim leader for the Conservatives, Trevor Halford, where she asked him about you. Now I'm continuing the interview longer between us two, but this is fun. But the Juno News interview, Candace Malcolm asked Trevor Halford, well, what about Dallas Brodie bringing up all these issues? And it really, she really exploded this as an issue into the public. And he kind of gives this tepid, well, these are good questions to be asking, and these are serious issues we need to take seriously. And then he doesn't name you, but he's clearly talking about you. It's like, but there's a way we can do this without being disrespectful. I'm like, oh, really? Really, Trevor? Did we hurt your feelings by bringing it up this way? Because we all know Trevor Halford, 5 seconds away from bringing it all up himself. He was about to do it before Dallas did it.
Right.
So pathetic.
Well, they say I'm being disrespectful. How am I being disrespectful? I have been nothing. I am respectful of the taxpayers of British Columbia. I'm here saying we have to get a handle on this. And if I, it's someone had to say it and do it, and I'm doing it, and I will keep doing it. And until they get a spine and start having good policy over there, they're going to keep drowning into a place of being irrelevant, because we're just going to move past them. I keep saying they keep leading from behind. I lead, they follow, steal take my words and stuff, which is fine. It's, I guess, what is there? Imitation is the greatest form of flattery. But I also say to myself, well, look, you guys need to really develop your policies and say what you're going to do. But I don't have a lot of confidence in that, because I've seen what goes on in that caucus, and it's still hopelessly divided internally. I often say it's not that they have different breeds of dogs in there, like, which is what a normal party would be. They have cats and dogs in there. So the twain shall never meet. And,
this was posted right before we went live. So it was like a few hours before we went live. So we have the Indigenous Affairs Minister, Spencer Chandra Herbert, had posted this morning, where he said, as Peter Millibar and Caroline Elliott enter the BC Conservative leadership race, I'm calling on every candidate to be clear. Residential school denialism has no place in British Columbia. And I think our response was quite good to this, but like maybe I'll bring that up. But I saw some of the Conservatives attempting to respond to Chandra Herbert, and they did not take it head on, saying, no, you're wrong. It's not residential school denialism to say that there are no bodies at Kamloops. It's not residential school denialism to have historical accuracy. They're like, well, I don't like your policies, Chandra. I'm like, he just implied you might be a denialist, and you're letting him get away with it. So I thought the response that you gave is the best one here. Because again, it was just a lot of flip-flopping from other people just trying to talk about other stuff. We said, Spencer, there are no bodies at the Kamloops Residential School. It is not denialism to point out activist falsehoods and stand for historical accuracy. Elliott and Millibar may not be willing to confront this head on, but we are. And so, that's how you deal with these people. You don't try and have a cute, clever response of saying, oh, Spencer, you turn your comments off and I don't want to respond to you. I'm like, he just tried to accuse you of something really disgusting. And the only way you come at these people is going back at them hard and saying, no, you're a horrible person. No, you don't care about historical accuracy. You don't dodge around it and try and talk about like DRIPA. But this is the problem, is that everyone's currently lacking a spine over there at the BC Conservative Party still. People on some of their campaigns are employing people who are involved in smearing you for saying that you are denying molestation victims' stories and all this stuff, which was a complete lie. Yeah. And these are the people who are going to be the new right warriors to take on the NDP, the ones who helped them smear you.
This is the other thing. It's shocking to see in politics how many people will just engage in outright lying. Like total lies.
It's not a little bit of a twisting of
fabricating stuff, just manufacturing stuff to take you down. It's incredible.
And people were willing there were people who, again, consider themselves to put the truth first, who in the middle of you being smeared for like a completely out of context statement on Francis Widdowson's podcast, where you're basically just mocking postmodernism and how people think that there's no such thing as the truth. There are people who consider themselves big truth warriors out there who are willing to take a 3.5 second out of context clip in order to try and smear your reputation. But don't worry, guys, we're going to fight back against the woke now. Those people are.
But remember, it wasn't even that they took a clip out of it. They took a whole statement and they compressed it down into really short. They sped it up to make it look, it was video alteration. And, I haven't, I'm still considering my actions in that regard, and I know who did it. And so I'm just like, I haven't forgotten about that little event. And it sits there, like it did happen, and it was manufactured again to make me look like something I'm not. Mm-hmm. And, but, I do have to say that I'm not completely naive. Politics is a really dirty business. I was warned about this before I came into it. I've actually never been in a business that behaves like this before, like this thing. But, I consider that, I don't need to make things up, because the calamity that is the NDP and the Conservative Party, there's so much material, you don't need to make anything up. Like, I don't need to manufacture anything. It's just an open mess. And you just can point at anything and say, look what's going on there. It's just a never-ending gift that keeps giving if you want to point out the problems going on over there. But with me, they have to manufacture it. There's no dirt on me. There's no dirt. I don't have any dirt. I have a normal life. You follow me around all day if you want. You can watch what I do. Yeah. You can watch who I meet with. You can hear, and what I say online right here with you is what I also say in private. So I don't say one thing on private phone calls and another thing in front of people. What you see is what you get. And that's much easier way to live, Wyatt, because then you don't need to remember what lie you told to this person or that person. and get all caught up in the lies.
Well, I can definitely agree with that. Well, thank you, Dallas, for coming on to the show today. I recommend everyone, again, go check out the Making Killing documentary. I'll pin at the top of the comments below, or check out the OneBC party website. Join the party, donate, do all those things if you're feeling inspired. Join up, volunteer. But yeah, we should do this again at some point, Dallas. Make this maybe a monthly sort of show, because honestly, BC politics is some of the most insane politics in the country. There's frustrating, dumb things that happen in other provinces, but not at the speed and frequency of BC.
Well, that's true. I mean, I've learned that one day it can be this, the next day it's that. So I just go day by day, and it's been a pleasure to come on with you, Wyatt. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. And thanks for everyone for watching. Like, share, subscribe, do all that fantastic stuff. Share with your friends, and we will be back doing something like this again, hopefully in the near future. See you all later.